welcome to this thrilling journey. In a world where humans and aliens collide, Max, an ordinary guy from Earth, finds himself thrown into an intergalactic political battle after an unexpected decision. Forced to choose between death or marriage to an alien princess, Max must not only fight for survival, but also face the dark conspiracies of powerful forces. Will he be able to change his fate and fight for freedom, or will he get caught in dangerous galactic political games? Join us on this Sci-Fi HFY adventure full of tension, twists, and surprises. Max Carter had always dreamed of the stars, but as he sat in a dimly lit bar on his 27th birthday, sipping synthetic whiskey that tasted more like regret than celebration, the stars seemed as distant as ever. The neon lights outside flickered erratically, as if mocking him for daring to imagine a life beyond this gritty, lifeless rock. He looked at the holographic advertisements for luxury star cruises, vessels that could take him to the far reaches of the galaxy. He couldn't even afford a seat in the cheapest cabin, and yet, every year he found himself daydreaming about a world that was just out of reach. His friend Tom, already 3 drinks ahead, leaned over with a grin. "Man, you've got to stop obsessing over those cruise ads. They're designed to make us feel like we don't matter." Max snorted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Easy for you to say. You've actually been to lunar base. Me? I package energy drinks for a living. The closest I get to space travel is stamping fuel for the cosmos on cans." A laugh escaped Tom's lips. "Yeah, well, let's fix that. Tonight's on me. I know just the thing to lift your spirits." With a mischievous glint in his eye, Tom called over the bartender. "Joey, bring out the Nebula 9, the one with the warning label." Max raised an eyebrow. "What, you think this'll help me forget I'm stuck here on Earth, working a dead-end job?" "You'll thank me later," Tom grinned. Max had no idea what he was in for. The blue, glowing liquid in his glass looked like something out of a science fiction novel. He shrugged and knocked it back, feeling the burn as it hit his throat. The world around him blurred. The bar spun. The walls seemed to ripple with the strange glow from the drink, and before he knew it, everything went black. When he awoke, it wasn't the dingy bar that greeted him. It was something otherworldly. Max's heart raced as he found himself lying on a glowing platform, suspended in midair. He blinked, trying to focus, but the surreal landscape was too much to comprehend. Massive spires, connected by glowing bridges, stretched into a purple sky. Metallic vehicles zipped by, defying the laws of gravity. "Welcome to Starhaven, mortal," a calm, almost ethereal voice purred. Max shot to his feet, his heart pounding. "What the?" And that was only the beginning of his adventure, one that would lead him to the most unexpected of places, a royal court, an alien princess, and a choice that would change the course of his life forever. Max's head throbbed as he staggered to his feet, trying to get his bearings. The glowing platform beneath him hummed gently, responding to his movements, almost like it was alive. The voices that had spoken earlier, one deep and resonant, the other sharp and melodic, were coming from towering statues that seemed to defy both architecture and physics. One statue was made of shifting smoke, constantly morphing, while the other was composed of geometric shapes that rearranged themselves, as though they were in a perpetual state of transformation. Max rubbed his eyes, still not quite sure if he was dreaming or having a very bad hangover. "Is this some kind of virtual reality?" he muttered, trying to clear his head. "No," said the smooth, deep voice of the smoke statue. "This is very real, mortal." Max whipped around, his heart skipping a beat. He looked at his hands to confirm they were still there. Yep, they were. The platform beneath his feet sparkled with patterns that seemed to respond to his every move. A chill ran down his spine. "All right, what kind of joke is this?" Max asked, his voice tinged with panic. "Did Joey slip me something way stronger than I thought?" "Jacques, you would do well to listen, human," the geometric statue intoned. "You are no longer in your world. You have crossed into ours." Max's eyes widened as the realization hit him. This was not a dream. He had somehow been transported to a completely different realm. He took a shaky step forward, trying to make sense of his surroundings. Floating islands, impossibly tall spires, and strange beings moved in the distance. "Yeah, well, I think I'd rather wake up from this nightmare," now Max muttered, turning toward the edge of the platform. He reached out, his hand brushing against the shimmering surface of what appeared to be an infinite drop. Before he could think any more about it, a new voice, sharp and almost playful, interrupted his thoughts. Trying to escape already? Not a good idea. Max froze. A holographic cat, glowing with a starlight pattern, materialized in front of him. Its eyes glinted as it floated casually in the air. You're a cat? Max blinked, wondering if his mind had completely snapped. Not just any cat, the cat replied in a smooth, almost smug voice. I am your assigned orientation guide. Welcome to Starhaven. Max gaped at the cat, unable to form a coherent thought. Wait, what? Orientation guide? This isn't real, is it? I assure you everything here is very real, the cat responded, unperturbed by Max's disbelief. You are in the realm of the Neonar people, specifically the court of Princess Lyanna. Princess Lyanna? Max repeated, trying to process the information. What am I supposed to do here? I didn't sign up for any of this. You don't have to sign up for everything in life, the cat replied. You're here, and you will see the princess. Max was about to protest when the platform beneath him shifted, pulling him forward. A glowing corridor materialized ahead, and he found himself moving toward a massive crystalline structure hanging in midair. His feet moved on their own, as though the platform had a mind of its own. What is this place? Max asked, trying to keep calm as he was guided through the labyrinth of impossible architecture. You will soon meet the princess, the cat replied, floating beside him. She is not like the royals of your world. She does not fit the mold of the perfect passive princess. She is different. Different how? Max asked, feeling a mix of curiosity and dread. The cat gave a small flick of its tail. You'll see soon enough. Just be respectful. The Neonar people take matters of etiquette very seriously. Max groaned. Right, yeah. I'll just make sure I don't insult anyone this time. As they passed through twisting, radiant halls, Max's mind raced. Was this real? Could he have really ended up on an alien planet because of one drunken night? He was still trying to make sense of the situation when they arrived at a massive throne room, its floor shimmering like liquid glass, reflecting the countless stars that hovered in the atmosphere above. The ceiling was a view into deep space, with nebulas swirling and distant stars shining brightly. Impressive, huh? The cat said with a little smirk. Max didn't answer. His attention was drawn to the figure standing at the center of the room, Princess Lyanna. She was more stunning than any description Max could have imagined, her skin a deep violet that shimmered with an inner glow. Her eyes, silver like liquid moonlight, swept across the room, taking in the court as she made her way down a set of crystalline steps that seemed to form beneath her feet. Max's breath caught in his throat. Max? The cat whispered with a note of warning. Don't do anything rash. But it was already too late. Max, still disoriented and feeling like he was in the middle of the most insane hallucination, called out in a voice that wasn't quite his own. Well, if it isn't the most beautiful princess in the galaxy. The room went silent. Princess Lyanna paused mid-step, turning her gaze to Max. Her expression was unreadable, though the flicker of irritation in her eyes didn't escape him. Max, oblivious to the situation, grinned and added, I mean, you've got the whole glowing skin and silver eyes thing going on. Definitely an over-the-top look, but hey, it works. The air in the room seemed to freeze. A hush fell over the court. Max, you've done it again, the cat muttered under its breath. Before Max could say anything more, a powerful voice boomed through the chamber. You dare mock the royal house of Starhaven? King Darian's deep voice rumbled from the throne at the far end of the room. You, a mere mortal, come here and insult my daughter in front of the court? Max's grin faltered as he realized the weight of what he had just done. The other beings in the court, a mix of creatures Max couldn't even begin to categorize, looked at him with a mix of shock and disdain. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Max scratched the back of his head awkwardly. I didn't exactly mean to. You will pay the price for this insolence, King Darian said coldly. In accordance with the ancient laws of Starhaven, one who insults a member of the royal family must either face death or marry the one they have insulted. Max's mouth went dry. Wait, what? Princess Lyanna's expression faltered for a moment, but her gaze quickly turned cold again. You have offended me, Earthling. The law is clear. Max's heart raced as he looked from the king to the princess, trying to process the absurdity of it all. "Wait a minute, I can't." Before he could finish, the king's voice rang out. "You will choose, marry my daughter or face execution at dawn." Max's heart was pounding, his mind racing. He stood frozen in the middle of the throne room, the weight of the king's ultimatum pressing down on him. "Wait, wait, wait," Max stammered, his words coming out in a rush. "You've got to be kidding me. You can't seriously expect me to marry her?" The room was dead silent, every eye in the chamber fixed on him. Even Princess Lyanna, who had been cold and composed, seemed to stiffen, her silver eyes narrowing in disbelief. Max's mouth was dry, his thoughts spinning like a whirlwind. Marry an alien princess? This was ridiculous. "Your choices are simple, Earthling," King Darian's voice thundered. "Either marry my daughter, Princess Lyanna, and face the consequences of your actions with dignity, or meet the executioner at dawn." Max's stomach churned as the realization hit him. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some elaborate prank or nightmare. This was real, and he was in deep, impossibly deep. The holographic cat, Starry, hovered beside him, its starry form blinking as if it could feel the tension in the air. "I tried to warn you about etiquette, Max," Starry muttered, though its tone had an air of sympathy. "But no one listens to a talking cat until it's too late." Max clenched his fists. "So what exactly happens if I refuse to marry her?" He couldn't quite wrap his mind around the idea of being married to a stranger, let alone a princess from another galaxy. "There will be no refusal," King Darian declared, his voice like a low rumble of thunder. "This is the law of Starhaven. Those who insult the royal family must either make amends through marriage or face death." Max's mind spun. He had no idea what was worse, being married off to a princess he had just insulted, or the alternative. He didn't even know what he was supposed to do here. He was just a guy who worked in packaging energy drinks, not some noble or diplomat. Yet here he was, standing before the king and his daughter, with death or marriage hanging in the balance. "Look, I don't know how your laws work, but—" Max began, trying to stall, but King Darian raised a hand, silencing him instantly. "The law is not open to negotiation. You will choose now," the king said, his gaze unwavering. Max swallowed hard. He glanced over at Princess Lyanna, who had been eerily quiet. She was staring at him with a mixture of frustration and something else. Was that a hint of curiosity in her eyes? Max couldn't tell. She finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You've insulted my honor, Earthling, but the law is the law." Her words seemed to carry the weight of centuries of tradition. She didn't look at him with anger. No, there was something more complex in her expression. But still, the tension in the air thickened, and the court waited for Max's response. He was still in disbelief. He couldn't be serious. He couldn't possibly choose to marry someone just because he'd made a stupid joke about her appearance. This was insane. "Well, Max trailed off, unable to finish the thought. His mind was a blur of confusion. He glanced around the room at the silent witnesses, the diverse beings, some of which he couldn't even comprehend. His thoughts whirled, and then his eyes landed on Princess Lyanna again. She was still standing tall, but there was something different about her posture now. Something that spoke of her own hidden struggle, of her own burdens. Max's heart clenched. He couldn't deny that, despite everything, he was intrigued by her. She wasn't just a princess. There was something else there, something real. He'd caught glimpses of it when they first met, the way she carried herself with authority, yet with a wariness that seemed out of place for someone in her position. "Listen, Max began, but King Darian interrupted. "You will make your choice," the king insisted. "Do not waste time." Max looked at the ground, taking in a shaky breath. This was happening. There was no way out, no way to undo the damage he'd done with one careless comment. Finally he spoke, his voice barely a whisper, though it carried across the room. "I'll marry her." The moment the words left his mouth, the entire court seemed to exhale in unison, as if a massive weight had been lifted. Princess Lyanna's expression didn't change, but her eyes briefly flickered with something. Resignation? Relief? It was hard to tell. "Very well," King Darian said, his voice no longer filled with anger, but rather with a strange finality. "The marriage ceremony will take place at dawn. You are dismissed until then." Max nodded numbly, unable to comprehend the enormity of the situation. As the guard stepped forward to escort him away, he felt a strange sense of relief, though he wasn't sure why. He had just agreed to marry a princess, an alien princess, and yet something deep within him told him that this wasn't the end of the story. No, it was just the beginning. As they led him away from the throne room, Max glanced over his shoulder at Princess Lyanna. She had not moved, but her eyes were fixed on him, her gaze intense, as if searching for something in his expression. He couldn't tell what she was thinking, but something told him this wasn't going to be a simple, forced marriage. There was more to her than met the eye, and maybe, just maybe, there was more to this whole mess than he could see right now. The guards escorted him down long, winding corridors. His heart still pounded, but something in him, a curiosity, maybe a sense of defiance, began to stir. Maybe this wasn't the kind of birthday Max had envisioned, but if there was one thing he knew for sure, it was that this strange alien world held more surprises than he could have ever imagined. Max was led down a series of crystalline hallways, each turn more confusing than the last. The architecture of Starhaven was unlike anything he had ever seen, impossibly sleek, made of materials that seemed to shimmer and pulse with energy. The guards moved in perfect synchronization, their expressions unreadable as they flanked him on either side. It was hard to tell whether they were watching him closely because he was a prisoner or because they were simply used to their surroundings. They finally stopped in front of a large, transparent door. Beyond it was a room that looked almost like a high-tech prison cell. There were no bars, no traditional walls, but a series of force fields that pulsed with energy. The walls were smooth, made of a material that reflected the stars in the sky beyond. A panoramic view of Starhaven stretched out before him, and for a moment, Max forgot about everything. He stood there, entranced by the vast alien city below. "This is where you'll be staying for the night," one of the guards said, his voice impassive. "The wedding ceremony will be at dawn." Max blinked, trying to shake off his awe. The reality of the situation crashed back down on him. "A wedding! At dawn! Right! This is insane!" "You'll be well cared for," the guard added before stepping aside, leaving Max alone in the room. The force field activated with a soft hum, and he was left to stare out at the floating city. Max paced around the room, his mind spinning. How had he gotten here? Just a few hours ago, he had been in a bar on Earth, grumbling about his dead-end life. Now he was trapped on an alien world, about to marry an alien princess after insulting her in front of an entire royal court. The absurdity of it all made him laugh out loud, though the sound felt hollow in the quiet chamber. He sat down on the hovering chair in the center of the room, rubbing his temples. His thoughts kept drifting back to Princess Lyanna. She was beautiful, that much was undeniable. But there was something more to her, something that he couldn't quite place. She wasn't the type to be easily offended, and yet the law of Starhaven had made it clear. Once she was insulted, the consequences were dire. But it wasn't just that. It was the way she held herself, the subtle strength in her posture. She was a princess, yes, but she was more than that. She was a force in her own right. Max was snapped out of his thoughts when the holographic cat, Starry, materialized in the corner of the room. It floated in front of him, its starlit form twinkling like a galaxy in motion. "Well, that was an interesting turn of events," Starry said, its voice playful yet tinged with a hint of sympathy. "Didn't expect you to agree to the marriage so quickly." Max shot the cat a weary glance. "What was I supposed to do? Choose death? I didn't exactly have much of a choice there." "No," Starry agreed. "You didn't. But you do now. The future's still open, despite your, well, colorful first impression with the princess." Max leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. "Yeah, I really messed up, huh? I mean, I never thought I'd end up marrying an alien princess. This is a mess." Starry's glowing eyes seemed to soften. "You're not the first mortal to find themselves in an unexpected position. The laws of Starhaven are ancient and unforgiving, but they can be navigated. If you truly want to change your fate, you'll have to think carefully. Your words matter here, far more than you realize." Max sighed and leaned forward. "I just don't get it. What am I supposed to do? I'm not some hero or diplomat. I'm just a guy who's really bad at making first impressions." The cat circled around him in the air, its form shimmering like distant stars. "Maybe it's time to stop thinking of yourself as just a guy. What you've done today, for better or worse, has already set the stage for something bigger. The princess isn't just an alien royal. She's a person with her own desires and dreams. If you truly want to survive here, Max, you'll need to understand that. Max glanced at the force field again, then back at the cat. So, what? You're telling me I have to get her to like me? Like, marry her and live happily ever after? Starry let out a low, almost amused purr. Love is complicated, mortal, but you don't have to marry her out of duty. Marry her because you want to, because you see the person she truly is. The universe has a way of making the most impossible situations interesting. Max thought about it for a moment. He didn't know anything about intergalactic marriage or royal etiquette, but one thing was certain. Something about Princess Lyanna called to him. She wasn't just some figurehead to be married off for political reasons. There was depth to her, and he was starting to see that. Just as he was about to ask Starry another question, the door to his room slid open with a soft hiss. Princess Lyanna stepped in, her purple skin glowing faintly in the low light. She wore a simple yet elegant outfit, a sharp contrast to the flowing robes she had worn in the throne room. Her silver eyes met his, and for a moment they stood in silence, both unsure of what to say. Max stood, surprised at his own boldness. Hey, I wasn't expecting you to show up. I thought you'd be busy with, I don't know, royal stuff? Princess Lyanna's gaze softened, though her posture remained rigid. I had no choice but to come. This situation is not ideal for either of us. Max nodded, unsure of what to say next. He hadn't exactly planned for this moment, but now that she was here, he figured he should at least try to talk to her. Look, I'm sorry for what I said earlier. I know it was stupid, but I didn't know what I was walking into. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she walked past him, her eyes scanning the room as she took in the surroundings. No one does, but you seem different from the others who have crossed my path. Max raised an eyebrow. Different how? She turned back to face him, her eyes piercing. You're not afraid of me. Most people, when they first encounter a princess, are filled with awe and fear. You, on the other hand, you mock me without thinking of the consequences. Max couldn't help but laugh nervously. Yeah, well, I guess I've never been great at following the rules. Princess Lyanna's expression didn't change, but the faintest hint of a smile played at the corners of her lips. No, you haven't, but that's what makes you interesting. Max didn't know where this conversation was going, but he felt something shift between them. A connection, however brief, however unlikely. He wasn't sure if it was the beginning of a bond or just a fleeting moment, but for the first time since arriving on Starhaven, he didn't feel entirely out of place. The silence hung in the air between them, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. There was something unspoken, something they both knew. The future was uncertain, but Max had a feeling that whatever happened next, he wasn't going to face it alone. Max stood still, the weight of the silence pressing down on him. Princess Lyanna's words lingered in the air like a faint melody, and he couldn't shake the sense that something significant had just shifted between them. She wasn't just a princess. She was a person with her own fears and desires, not some untouchable figure. The idea that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one in this strange situation, fumbling through it, felt like a small victory. But before he could process everything, the sound of hurried footsteps broke the quiet. A pair of guards entered, their faces serious as they approached Princess Lyanna. Max tensed instinctively, expecting something unpleasant, but the princess raised a hand to stop them. "Leave us," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. The guards hesitated for a moment before bowing and stepping out of the room, leaving Max and Lyanna alone once again. Lyanna turned back to him, her expression now hardening, though there was still that faint trace of vulnerability hidden beneath her royal demeanor. She sighed, clearly conflicted. "The situation has changed," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You may think this is just about a forced marriage, Max, but there's much more at play here than you realize." Max raised an eyebrow, unsure where this conversation was headed. More? Like what? Lyanna's eyes flickered to the door, and then to the window, where the night sky stretched beyond them. "The Blackthorn Dynasty," she said, her voice suddenly cold and filled with bitterness. They've been a thorn in my family's side for generations. They don't want me on the throne. They want control. And now they see you as an opportunity. Max's mind raced. An opportunity for what? An alliance, she replied, her voice hardening. If you marry me, they will have a direct claim to the throne of Starhaven. They'll use our union as leverage to gain political power. My father believes this will secure peace, but I know better. This isn't about peace, it's about control. Max blinked, trying to absorb the weight of her words. This wasn't just a case of royal laws and ancient traditions. This was politics, a dangerous game being played with lives, his included. He wasn't sure how he had gotten himself tangled in all of this, but it was clear that his presence here was more than a mistake. He was a pawn in a much larger scheme. So I'm just a tool for their political games? Max asked, his voice tinged with frustration. You think marrying me will give them the power they want? Lyanna nodded, her gaze unwavering. That's exactly what they think, but it's not just that. The Blackthorn Dynasty is dangerous, Max. They will stop at nothing to achieve their goals. They've already tried to assassinate me once. Max's eyes widened. What? You were almost killed? She nodded, the weight of her words hanging in the air. It wasn't the first time, and it won't be the last. Max felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't expected this. He thought his biggest concern was surviving the wedding and trying not to completely embarrass himself. But now, with the threat of assassination hanging over Princess Lyanna, he realized just how deep the danger ran. He wasn't just dealing with alien politics. He was caught in the middle of a deadly power struggle. We need to be prepared, Lyanna said, her voice low and urgent. The Blackthorn Dynasty won't give up easily. They'll come after us, no matter what. Max swallowed hard. What can we do? Lyanna turned to face him fully now, her silver eyes glinting in the dim light. We'll need to show them that we're not afraid, that we won't be controlled. That's why I need your help, Max. Max blinked, taken aback. My help? I'm just a guy who... She cut him off, her voice fierce. You're more than just a guy who drinks too much at bars. You've got something that they don't expect. You've got the power to surprise them, to catch them off guard. You just need to stop thinking of yourself as a victim and start thinking of yourself as someone who can make a difference. Max's chest tightened. He had never considered himself a hero, let alone someone who could play a part in a galactic political struggle. But the way Lyanna looked at him, like he mattered, made him wonder if maybe he could actually help. Maybe, just maybe, his presence here wasn't an accident after all. Before Max could respond, a loud bang echoed from the hallway outside the room. The force field in front of them flickered briefly, and Max felt a surge of panic. He turned toward the door, his pulse quickening. Something was wrong. This was too much of a coincidence. Lyanna's expression hardened. Stay here, and stay out of sight. Max nodded, though his mind raced. He couldn't just sit idly by. Not after what he just heard. The Blackthorn Dynasty was a serious threat, and now he was tied up in their schemes. He had to find out more to see how he could help. As Lyanna moved toward the door, Max grabbed her arm, stopping her. Wait, he said urgently. You can't do this alone. Let me help. I don't know what I can do, but I won't just sit back while people try to kill you. Lyanna looked at him for a long moment, her silver eyes searching his face. You really want to get involved in this? Max nodded, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his gut. I don't have a choice now, do I? For the first time, Lyanna's lips curled into a small, appreciative smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to reassure him. All right, she said softly. We'll do this together. Max watched as she stepped into the hallway, her posture resolute. He felt a surge of determination. This was no longer about being a pawn in a royal game. This was about survival, and maybe something deeper. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time since arriving in Starhaven, he felt like he had a chance to change his fate. As the door slid shut behind her, Max took a deep breath. He had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain. He was no longer just an outsider. He was part of something much bigger, something dangerous, and it was up to him to help protect it. The corridor outside Max's room was eerily quiet, the usual hum of the floating city's energy fields now muted, as if the very air held its breath. Max's heart raced, each beat echoing in his chest as he stood there, staring at the door Princess Lyanna had just exited through. He was caught between the lingering remnants of fear and the strange sense of purpose that had begun to grow in him. His life had been so simple before, so predictable. Work, routine, his usual gripes about the monotony of Earth. Now he was standing at the precipice of something he could barely comprehend. The Blackthorn Dynasty, the princess, the deadly game they were all playing. It was too much for one man to handle. He didn't know the first thing about political intrigue, assassins, or royal conspiracies. And yet, in that moment, Max realized something deeper. He had already chosen. He'd crossed a line from which there was no turning back. He glanced toward the force field, the stars twinkling through the transparent walls, as though mocking him with their infinite distance. He had no idea what was about to happen, but he knew he wouldn't be running from it. Not anymore. Suddenly, the faintest of sounds reached his ears. A whisper in the hallway, followed by a muffled crash. His instincts kicked in, and he darted to the door, peering out into the dark corridor. The guards had scattered, their steps receding in the distance. What was happening? The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed again, but this time, they were faster, more deliberate. Max's heart skipped a beat. Whoever it was, they weren't friendly. Without thinking, he stepped into the hallway, his pulse quickening as he followed the sounds of movement. He rounded a corner, and there she was, Princess Lyanna, her face tense with worry, though she remained poised, every inch the royal. She was moving toward a small hidden door, far from the main hall. "Princess!" Max called out, barely recognizing his own voice. It was strange, urgent, desperate. He hadn't even considered what he was about to say. He just knew he couldn't let her face whatever danger this was alone. She stopped, turning toward him with a flash of surprise in her silver eyes. "Max," she said softly, almost regretfully, "I told you to stay inside. This isn't your fight." "I don't have a choice," he replied, stepping closer. "You're in danger. I'm not going to sit in my room while they try to kill you." Her eyes flickered with something, maybe a hint of admiration, maybe frustration. "This isn't the way, Max. The Blackthorn Dynasty won't stop. Not now." "I'm not running," he said firmly. "I'm here to help." For a moment, she was silent. Then, as if resigning herself to the inevitable, she nodded and motioned for him to follow her. "Then come, but stay close. We need to reach the council chambers before they do." Max didn't hesitate. He followed her down a narrow passageway that seemed to stretch endlessly, every corner twisting into shadows. His heart pounded as they moved deeper into the labyrinthine halls, the air growing colder as they descended. He could hear whispers in the distance, too faint to make out, but their presence made his skin crawl. As they rounded another corner, Lyanna paused and turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Blackthorn Dynasty won't give up without a fight. They've been planning this for years. If we're going to survive this, we have to be smarter than they are." Max nodded. "What's the plan?" She took a deep breath, her gaze unwavering. "I need to make it to the council chambers. There, I can expose the truth, their involvement in the assassinations, their ties to the Shadowcrest dynasty. If I can prove that they are behind the unrest, I can convince my father to act before it's too late." Max's mind whirled with the weight of her words. This wasn't just a marriage for political power. This was a battle for control of Starhaven itself. And Lyanna wasn't the helpless princess he had first imagined. She was a fighter, a strategist, and someone who would do whatever it took to protect her people. Her determination was infectious, and for the first time, Max felt like he wasn't just some pawn in their game. He was part of something bigger. But as they continued down the dimly lit passageway, a chill ran down Max's spine. He could feel the danger creeping closer, a shadow that threatened to swallow them both whole. Suddenly, there was a loud crash, followed by the unmistakable sound of weapons being drawn. The lights flickered overhead, and Max's hand instinctively went to his side, where he wished he had some kind of weapon. His thoughts raced, but there was no time to strategize. They had to act, and fast. Lyanna's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "Stay close. If we're spotted, they'll know we're onto them." Max nodded, but his mind was already working. He wasn't a fighter, not by any stretch of the imagination. But he wasn't going to let Lyanna face this alone. The Blackthorn Dynasty was coming for her, and there was no way in hell he was going to let them win. Max hesitated, unsure of what to say. This wasn't a question he had prepared for, not with everything that had been happening, but the weight of her gaze made him feel like he had to ask. Yeah, us. You and me. What happens now? After all of this? Lyanna stood still for a moment, her silver eyes reflecting the distant stars as she processed his words. She wasn't looking for the perfect answer, just the truth, and that was what he was giving her, something real. She stepped closer, her voice low but steady. I don't know what the future holds either, Max, but whatever it is, we face it together. She paused, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't quite decipher. You've been more of a help than you realize. We're in this now, this fight, this life, and I need someone by my side who doesn't hesitate. Max felt a warmth spread through him. The quiet intensity in her eyes was unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was as if the entire weight of Starhaven rested in their hands, and for the first time, Max didn't feel like an outsider anymore. He felt like part of something bigger than himself. Then I'm with you, he said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he was committing to. No matter what comes next. Lyanna gave him a soft smile, one that spoke volumes of trust, of partnership, and of understanding. Then let's make sure we don't just survive, Max. Let's change the future. They stood together in the council chamber, the weight of the galaxy pressing down on their shoulders. The battle was far from over. There were enemies still lurking in the shadows, plans yet to unfold, but for the first time in a long while, Max felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, by Lyanna's side. And as they turned to face the future, he knew this was just the beginning of something far greater than anything he could have ever imagined. Max hesitated for a moment. The truth was, he didn't have all the answers. He didn't know what their future held, whether it would be filled with more danger, more battles, or something entirely different. But for the first time in his life, he didn't feel lost. He felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. I don't know what the future holds, Max said, looking up at her, his voice steady. But I know that I'm not going anywhere, not while you need me. She smiled, and it was a smile that spoke of something more than just gratitude. It was a promise. Then stay, Max. Stay, and let's make sure that whatever comes next, we face it together. The room was silent, the air between them thick with possibility. Outside the windows, the stars continued to swirl, their patterns ever-changing, unpredictable, much like the future they were about to shape. But no matter the challenges they would face, Max felt ready. He no longer felt like the man who had stumbled into this world by mistake. He was part of something bigger now, something that would change Starhaven forever. And so as the stars shimmered above and the fate of an entire world lay in their hands, Max knew that the adventure was just beginning. Whether it would lead them to victory or to even darker days, he was no longer afraid of what the universe had in store for them. They had each other, and that was enough. The journey had only just begun.